to the members of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bambino, the Sultan of Sports, Babe Ruth.
I consider myself the
And he first we thought that was color and they were white. I mean, we could play together. I think that was my main basically.
Mantle has hit a 1-0. Rose swings on the 3-0 pitch.
The Dodgers are World Series champions.
The Greats of the Game looks at the career of Mickey Mantle.
From the very beginning, the New York Yankees have had their share of heroes. First, in the 20s and 30s, there was Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Then in the 40s, there was Joe DiMaggio. And of course, in the 50s and 60s, there was Mickey Mantle. Hi, I'm Tim McCarver, and welcome to a special episode of the Greats of the Game. When Mickey Mantle came to New York in 1951, he was no more than a country boy from Commerce, Oklahoma, with a tremendous amount of potential. But when he left 18 years later, the Mick was a legend, perhaps the single greatest player in Yankee history. So it's indeed my pleasure to go on the road with the Greats of the Game to the home, and a beautiful home, I might add, of Mickey Mantle. Mick, welcome.
Hey, Tim. Welcome to Dallas.
All right. Everybody has often said, what's in a name? I mean, how can you not succeed with a name like Mickey Mantle? I mean, after all, you had baseball in your blood from the get-go, didn't you?
Yeah, my dad loved baseball. He used to say that's all he lived for. You know, he died in the wintertime. He named me after Mickey Cochran, and a lot of people think that my name's really Michael or something like that, but it really is Mickey Mantle, and I'm glad he didn't name me Gordon. I mean, I ain't got nothing against Gordon, but I'm glad it's Mickey.
Gordon Mantle in New York.
Nah, wouldn't work.
You mentioned your dad. You were very close to your father, weren't you?
Oh yeah, he's probably the biggest thing. You know, he wanted me to be a baseball player, and that's all we ever worked for. You know, I mean. If he would have been alive when my kids were born, I'm sure they would all have been baseball players too, because that's all he lived for, is to make me a baseball player.
If ever there was anyone who was born to be a ball player, it was Mickey Mantle. As the 18-year-old son of an Oklahoma miner, Mickey caught the attention of New York Yankee scout Tom Greenway, who signed him in 1949. A year later, Mickey was a minor leaguer in Joplin, Missouri, on his way to the Yankees.
The first year that I went to the Yankees, in 1951, they went to Phoenix, Arizona, and we trained out there, and the air was light, and it was a good ballpark to hit in. I hit about 15 home runs in the spring training, and they started writing things, you know, like Mickey Mantle is going to be the next Babe Ruth, and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio all rolled into one, and it looked like it was going to be that way in spring training.
Putting a label like that on anyone might seem a bit unfair, but one thing was certain. After spending 2 years in the minors as a great-hitting, weak-fielding shortstop, Mickey was switched to the outfield and groomed as Joe DiMaggio's successor. Only his first season with the Yankees didn't go according to plan. After his big build-up, both the press and the fans turned on Mantle when his strikeouts began to outnumber his hits. And by the middle of the summer, a disconsolate Mantle was back in the minors.
I'd really given up on myself by then. You know, I couldn't hit in the major leagues, and it didn't look like I could hit with Kansas City. And I called my father up from Kansas City, and he's working in the mines. I said, Dad, I just don't think I can, I'm not going to make it, I don't think. I guess I can't be a baseball player. And he said, well, where are you at? And I said, in the Aladdin Hotel here in Kansas City. He said, well, I'll be right there. So he come up. I thought he was going to pat me on the back, you know, say, hey, hang in there, kid, or something. Boy, he come up there, and he grabbed my suitcase, throwed it on the bed, and he started throwing my stuff in. I didn't have very much, one sport coat or something like that, and one pair of shoes. Anyway, he's packing my stuff, and I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm taking you home. He said, I thought I raised a man. He said, you're not a man, you're a coward. So you give up. He said, you can just go back and work in the mines with me. And it really woke me up. I mean, I finally, before it was over with, I was begging him to let me keep trying. You know, he said, I'll take you back there and you can be a miner like I am the rest of your life. And before it was over, I was saying, hey, let me have another shot at it, you know. And right after he left, everything just broke the other way.
Things broke the other way for Mantle, all right. In his next 40 minor league games, Mickey batted .361. And by late August, he was back in the majors, hitting the type of homers he was expected to hit. To go along with his natural power, Mantle could also run extremely well. But that part of his game was dealt a serious blow against the Giants during the 1951 World Series. In the second game of the series that year, the then speedy Mantle led off for the Yankees. But in the sixth inning, Mickey stepped on the rubber cover of a drain hole buried in the outfield grass and tore a cartilage in his right knee.
Well, your dad was at that World Series, and he saw you get hurt, and something very strange happened the next day, and very sad, huh?
Well, yeah, that's the next day. My leg had swollen up. They put like a splint on it and wrapped it up with that like an ace bandage, you know. But my dad, the next morning, he took me to Lenox Hill Hospital, and he gets out of the cab first, and I couldn't put any weight on my right leg because it was so sore. And I put my arm around him to jump out of the cab, and when I did, I put all my weight on him, and he just crumpled over on the sidewalk. And so they had to come out and get us both, and they took us in the hospital. We got in the same room, and that's when I found out that my dad had Hodgkin's disease. That was pretty much of a shock to me. You know, he was 39 years old and like in the prime of his life, and he looked like he was strong and everything. I didn't even realize he was sick. Later that year, me and my wife, Merlin, took him to Mayo's clinic that winter, and that's when they told us that, you know, you might as well just let him go back and go to work or do whatever he wants to, because he's not going to last much longer. Then he did pass away the next spring in about May next year.
I suppose that in no other game but baseball, the things come in bunches. And that 52 season that you had after your rookie year, things really came in bunches, and a lot of them were bad, too, weren't they?
Well, yeah. In May of that year, my father died. Probably the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. Plus the fact that I was still not the next Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio like the people had been reading. It was pretty tough that year. I got married that winter in 1951, and well, when my dad died, that put a lot of responsibility on me. I had like to raise my younger brothers were still in high school, and my sister and my youngest brother was still in school, and it was just there was a lot of responsibility all of a sudden, and plus the fact, like I said, I wasn't doing as good as everybody thought I was supposed to, you know, so it was kind of tough there for a while.
Things might have been kind of tough for a while, but not for very long. Although Mickey might not have lived up to other people's expectations in those early years, his enormous talent did become more apparent each season, and soon his reputation began to grow.
And then when I was, I guess, 4 years old, I can remember seeing Mickey Mantle playing on television and having them say he is going to be the next superstar. And he was from Oklahoma. So for Mickey Mantle to be from Oklahoma, be a switch hitter, to be playing in center field for the New York Yankees, there just wasn't anything better.
Mickey, I would have to say, was the greatest that I played with in my time. I mean, either opposition or being teammates.
Mickey Mantle had the greatest talent of probably anybody that I ever played against. Sheer speed, power from both sides. You couldn't ask for anything more than what you saw in Mickey Mantle.
I actually felt sorry for him having to play all those years in New York, because it can be very vicious playing in New York. But fortunately, when you play on good teams, you overlook a lot of shortcomings. And I envied him in a way where he played on so many great teams. But Mickey was one of the great players I've ever seen, and I marveled at him. And I've always said he was the best player I ever played against.
With that type of respect from his peers and adulation from his fans, it was only a matter of time before Mickey became a national celebrity. And although he was shy by nature, Mickey soon made the biggest city in the country his personal showcase, taking advantage of opportunities off the field as well as on it.
Boy, I'm telling you, when I come up to the big leagues, I was a shuffling, grinning, head-ducking country boy. Well, I'm still a country boy, but I know a man down at Edwards and Hanley. I'm learning.
Edwards and Hanley, the brokers you've waited for.
I want my maple.
Of all the World Series homers you've hit, is there any one homer that's a stick out in your mind, or they all sort of become a blur?
Well, the first one that comes to my mind was in 1953 against Russ Myers with the bases loaded in Brooklyn.
Over that is one never to be forgotten. Let's hear a cheer for Mick.
When Mickey wasn't appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show, he was doing what he did best, hitting tremendous home runs. In 1955, he led the league with 37, and then in 1956, he hit 52 and won the Triple Crown with a .353 average and 130 RBIs.
During the 1956 season, Mick, I mean, did you really realize what was going on? I mean, only a handful of guys have won the Triple Crown.
I didn't, there was, like, if you're talking about pressure or something, there was no pressure until I got right down to the last month. Well, first of all, the pressure on me was for the 52 home runs. I was way ahead of Babe Ruth's record that year, you know. I mean, like, they started talking about I was 6 weeks ahead of his home run record. I think I'm going to hit 61. That was the pressure on me. I didn't even realize I was winning the Triple Crown. But it did. The pressure really gets on you later on in the year. I mean, I think we won a pennant that year by, there was no pressure that way, but just individually, there was a lot of pressure on me, yeah.
And you went on to beat the Brooklyn Dodgers in the World Series that year, and of course, negotiating for the next year, I imagine you got a very healthy raise, right?
Not really. The first contract I got the next year, well, I was making $32,500 that year. And you get, in those days, you got paid for what you did, you know, that next year. So
one-year contract.
One-year contracts, yeah. And I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna get to double my contract. Well, the first contract I got was for like a $5,000 raise. So I didn't even send it back, you know. I'm going to say, God, this can't even, I don't think he sent it to the right person, right? This must be Billy Martin's contract he sent me. But anyway, we finally, it looked like I was going to have to hold out, and Mr. Webb, Del Webb, called me and said, go on to spring training, we'll take care of you. And they made George Weiss give me twice what I made, and that's a 100% raise in those days was unbelievable, you know. They put me up to $65,000 a year.
All you guys kept doing year after year after year is win.
Well, whenever they traded Billy they traded Billy in 1957 in Kansas City, and they said it was because he was a bad influence on me. At that time, I was hitting about 400, and the year before, I already won the Triple Crown, you know, and he said, what do you think this guy can do anyway? Anyway, we found out later on it wasn't Billy that was a bad influence, it was Whitey.
Although the Yankees' version of the Three Musketeers was now a thing of the past, Mickey continued to hit. He followed up his Triple Crown season of '56 by hitting a career-high .365 in 1957. For that feat, Mantle was voted the league's MVP for the second consecutive year, while the Yankees found themselves in the World Series once again. Although they lost to the Braves in the '57 series, the Yankees came back to win in '58, the fifth time they won a world championship in Mickey's first decade.
Mick, after some mind-boggling years during the 50s, arguably the best decade of any team ever in the history of baseball, you only lost 2 years in '54 and '59. The Yankees started getting a new face, right? A lot of younger players coming in, and you all of a sudden become one of the old-timers. Huh?
That's right. It was still a great team, but it was like a whole new bunch, you know. All of a sudden, there's Cletus Boyers playing third, Tony Kubek shortstop, Bobby Richardson second. Roger Maris was, of course, carrying a big load in right field at that time. I was playing center field still. But it was still, I still believe the year that Roger hit the home run, the 61 home runs in 1961, I still believe that might have been the best team I ever played on.
That '61 team just might have been the best team anyone ever played on. While the Yankees ran away from the rest of the league, Mantle and Maris both staged an assault on Babe Ruth's single-season home run record. The two led the league on and off all year long and shared the inevitable pressure together.
What was it like in September between you and Roger? Was there a kidding atmosphere? Was it dead serious, or how did...
Well, there was a lot of stuff written that we didn't like each other, you know, during that year. That was the farthest thing from the truth it could ever be. I don't think I ever had an argument. I love Billy Martin and Whitey Ford. They're like my brothers. Roger Maris was the same way. Me and Roger lived together that year. I can remember he used to come in, wake me up, slap me in the head, wake me up, and he got the paper and he said, hey, Mick, wake up. He said, we're fighting again. I mean, he'd have a cup of coffee for me or something, you know. I mean, It was nothing like you read about it. I mean, there was no animosity between either one of us. I was for him. I guess I watched the last home run in the hospital, you know, when I was getting operated on. I don't think anybody in the world could have been more happy than I was that he broke that record.
Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Holy cow, it's
The Yankees finished off that memorable '61 season by facing the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series. It was no contest, even without a healthy Mantle, who had just 6 at-bats in the series as the Yankees beat the Reds in 5 games. By the time the 1962 season came around, Mickey was hampered by a series of injuries, and over the next 2 seasons, he played a total of just 188 games. Despite the injuries, Mickey would still hit the long ball, and the Yankees were still winning pennant after pennant. After losing to the Dodgers in the 1963 series, the Yankees won their 5th straight pennant in 1964, and were tied at a game apiece with the St. Louis Cardinals when Mantle batted in the bottom of the 9th of the series' 3rd game. The pitcher was knuckleballer Barney Schultz, the Cards' top reliever, and the score was tied at 1 apiece.
We'd had a clubhouse meeting that day, and they said, if you're going to hit Barney Schultz, you got to hit his first pitch, or one of the first 2, because he throws it a little bit harder. If he gets 2 strikes on you, you're dead, right? Because he's got a good, I don't know how you caught him. But anyway, he does have a good knuckleball. But I went back to Elston. Elston Howard was on the on-deck circle at that game whenever you guys brought Schultz in. I went back and I said, hey, Ellie, you can go sit down. This game's over. I don't know if you remember or not, but I made an error in right field that day. I was playing right field.
I do remember, yes.
And I made an error to let that run in.
Yep.
The score was 1-1, right? But if you make an error or something and lose a game in New York, the next day in the paper, you got the GOAT. You're the GOAT of the game, right? And it's the closest I ever came to it. So that's what really made me happy, is that I hit that home run off of him. But anyway, I went back and told Elston, I said, you can go sit down. This game's over. And luckily, I hit them.
The big Yankee crowd roaring now for some action. There's a high drive, hit the deep right, and forget about it. It is gone. The ball game's over. Mantle has just broken a World Series record. He now has hit 16 World Series home runs. He and Babe Ruth were tied with 15 apiece.
The '64 series was to be Mickey's last. Soon, the great Mantle found himself in an unfamiliar position, both on the field and in the standings.
I used to think, boy, it would be great if sometime, one year, that we wasn't in the World Series and I wasn't in a batting with Ted Williams or something like that. I thought, boy, it would be fun just to play a season like that. Well, all of a sudden, then in 1965, 66, and 67, the Yankees went from 1st to 7th or 8th, and I was out of the running and everything, and that's the worst time of my life. Those years just seemed like they just dragged by. I got to where I hated to go to the stadium, you know. So it's better to have that pressure on you and be playing for something, you know, trying to win. It's no fun the other way.
No fun, too, was Mickey's constant battle with injury and pain, which no doubt affected his career.
I would love to have seen Mickey Mantle with 2 good legs. He had to tape himself up, wrap himself up from hip to ankle.
Mickey might have been the best. Injuries hampered him, you know. Knee injuries, ankle injuries, other injuries. If he were as healthy as Willie, Mickey might have been the greatest all around.
Still, the Mick could sure hit homers with the best of them. And in 1967, he joined the exclusive 500 club.
Miller is ready. Here's the payoff pitch by Miller to Mantle. Swung on, there she goes!
Mickey finished his career with 36 more homers. And when he retired after the 1968 season at the age of 37, he was given a day at Yankee Stadium. A plaque was hung on the wall in center field next to the one given to Joe DiMaggio, a fitting tribute to a man who meant so much to baseball and the Yankees in particular.
The 3 most valuable player awards are great. You know, playing more games as a Yankee is a big to me. 18 World Series home runs. I don't think anybody will ever beat that, you know. I mean, I'm proud of that. But going into the Hall of Fame with Whitey is probably the biggest thing that ever happened to me.
Laying my life on the line. That's what I do all the time. I go out there each night, stand in a white line, lay my whole life on the line. Sometimes it all feels so good. Sometimes I just feel far from home. Sometimes I wonder, why do I do it? Have I been on this road for too long? And I'm laying my life on the line.
Mick, I'll never forget that hanging knuckleball you hit off Barney Schultz in the '64 series that I called. But more importantly, I'll never forget you being my guest today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Tim. It's a pleasure to finally make your show. I see a lot of them. I really like it. It's good.
For the greats of the game, I'm Tim McCarver.
Come on, let me show you the rest of the place.
You got a deal. Pitch and putt.
Yeah.
Hotel accommodations, compliments of the New York Marriott Marquis Hotel.